and it's your girl T D Moyo, and this right here is the Roundtable, and today we're back with an exciting episode all about grace and forgiveness. I'm gonna get right into it. You guys ready?
Yeah.
To talk a couple of things and them. Yeah, we ready?
Yeah.
Sweet one. What things that have happened in your life are you still learning to forgive?
I think mine is more about if I have not spoken about it out loud or confronted the situation, I might say it, but it will still be there. I'm a confrontational person. I have to tell you that you've pissed me off. Like, I have to say it. If you don't know and you're walking around smiling, I'm just like, like, why are you just so happy right now?
That's the most frustrating thing.
So I have to discuss it. So as long as I've spoken it and discussed it with you, you might take it or not take it, but you will know that we've had this conversation. I'm telling you how I feel. And that's how I start my process of forgiveness. I just begin. But
and that's how you start. Now that's dope.
Yeah.
A-Star, I'd love to know if there are any particular things that have happened in your life, things that you're still learning to forgive.
I think something big is being church hurt, coming from a Christian background, growing up in an environment where there's such a big expectation on you that you constantly feel like you have to live up to. And kind of breaking out of that environment where it's like, okay, I'm not going to live up to your expectations anymore. And in the Christian culture and the church environment, this is huge. And having to forgive for, you know, I guess being attacked for being myself, you know, and sometimes not agreeing with things and saying, no, I'm not going to go with that, or I don't agree with that, and it's actually okay. Having to forgive people that have put, you know, judgment on you and things like that. So that's been quite tough.
I think for me, I'm always in a state of forgiveness. And I live my life by that because I've always been so hard on myself. And I think if I'm never going to forgive myself, then I'll never forgive other people. Mm-hmm. So for me, when I said, aren't we always in a state of forgiveness? I think we have to be doing that all the time. Like constantly we need to be aware of forgiveness because we're never going to be living in peace if we're not forgiving ourselves and forgiving other people. Mm-hmm. So like, I feel like for me, for personal growth, it's a constant thing that I'm always aware of.
That's dope. Before I move on, Rachel, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, so I suppose one large event that happened in my life or in the life of my family that has been, so my father was murdered when I was 9 months old. And I guess in every life stage growing up, looking at the people around me and looking at what a father does in each given situation, and how that relationship evolves as someone grows older, it's meant that at each stage of recognizing what was taken from me or what I lost, I suppose I've had to forgive or work to forgive the people who took that from me and to understand what that was. But also it's meant that within my faith and within my relationship with God as a father, that's also evolved, and I've had to look at how in some ways I've been blessed even more by having to cling on to the Lord and how he's been a father in my life. Because I was so young when it happened, not having a father and the fact that my father was murdered, that always used to be kind of just a fact of my life. It took time to sort of realize, you know, the vicious intent to murder someone, you know, who my father was, you know, based on the people who were in his life and my mum telling me. But my mum forgave my father's murderers really soon after it happened. She didn't even like sort of pursue them and make sure that people were fully prosecuted. She made that choice to forgive because otherwise, in raising us, I've got 3 older brothers and we were all under 5 when it happened. So she didn't want to be carrying that kind of hatred. And it was, I mean, what would be the point in that? What good would come from taking that terrible event and just breeding more anger and hatred? Mm-hmm. And yeah, she made that decision to forgive them. And I think looking to her, because I mean, I lost a father who I never knew. She lost a partner, a friend, a husband, a father to her children. And she forgave, and that's just always inspired me, inspired my brothers. And I think that means in every aspect of my life, if people wrong me in some way, I think about that. I think about how my mum did that. And then in an even larger sense, I think about how Jesus forgave all the people who persecuted him, and then the wider message of how God forgives all of us for all the bad things we do.
Off the back of what she said, like my dad made this rule in our house that you have to forgive each other. This is not for the wider, but like how we grew up. you have to forgive within 24 hours. That was the house rule. So me and my sister can go at it. Like, my dad would let us go at it. Like, he doesn't even come and say, stop fighting. He just look at you like, I hope you have solved your problem after 24 hours. Like, and I remember an epic moment in my life where my sister and I actually went full blows, like, with each other. And the culture, the African culture, is very much, you don't talk back to your elders. That's how, in Nigeria where I grew up, that's how I was trained when I moved to the UK. My mom did not remove that from the system. It was like that every day. And my sister used to take the piss, and she used to get away with murder. And I couldn't understand why I couldn't voice my opinion. And then I go to school in Essex, and they teach you, speak your mind. And then I get home and they teach you, don't speak your mind. So I was just like, what do I do? And at this point, my sister did something that I think it was just something so stupid and so little, but her cup was full with me. And that's because I was holding because I couldn't express myself at home. And that little action she did, we went into a physical fight. And my sister's never seen me like that. My dad was just looking at us like, 24 hours, get over it. Like, that was how, like, we've grown up. Next morning, my sister called me to her room, and literally it was 24 hours. My dad, if he hears it's like 48 hours and you're still not talking to your sibling, are you mad? Like, you want us to turn this house upside down? So we just have that inbuilt in. So it's interesting that your mom was able to forgive so quickly, because now, like, I kind of understand why my dad is very much like, 24 hours, you should be over it by now. Like,
it's amazing because there is such breakthrough in forgiveness.
Yeah.
But is everything forgivable? Is everything forgivable?
I mean, it should be, right? It should be, because ultimately, the great example of that is God. God forgave us, so he sent his son, and then so that we can all, have everlasting life, so on and so forth. But, like, ultimately, like, I find it hard to forgive when someone disrespects me. You could do loads of things, but, like, if I pick up on a sense of disrespect, I just find, I think, a whole me. You're disrespecting me. Like, you're disrespecting me. I find it, there are certain things that I find, like, disrespect or, like, little petty things get to me. Like, whereas, like, you could do, like, the biggest thing to me and I'll just be like, oh, it's fine. Or I might blow up at you, but then, like, within hours, it's like, it's cool. It's like, I've forgotten about it.
But see, that's the thing. There's certain things that they happen. It's like, me. So it's like taking faith out of it. Like, how could you do that to me? Like, is everything forgivable? Like, taking faith out of it.
I think it's about the effect it has on you, and that's what I'm learning more recently. I had a really bad experience with someone within my industry that was taking bread off my table. Situation. It was quite intense. And I remember anytime you say her name, I'll just be like, don't talk about her. I hate her. I used to say this word, I hate her. I hate her. Anyone can ask me about this person. I'd be like, don't talk about this person. And I realized I went through, like, a very, like, depressed phase, like a few months ago. And I realized, wait, all this hatred I've been speaking, all this negativity, it's not actually touching the person that I'm talking. It's affecting me. It's such an internal thing. And I realized I was carrying all this thing inside me. And then now, like, I called her and I said, you know what? I'm sorry. Not because of the things you've done, because we know you did me dirty, but I'm sorry for carrying your name under the mud after it, because that's when I went wrong and I should have forgiven her for myself.
When people may do something to us, like, it affects us, but there's elements of our ego as well, which hit us. Yeah. And you said there's levels to this. There's so many layers of us. And I feel like growing as a person is kind of like an onion. So you peel one layer, and then you're like, there's another layer. And you're like, oh my gosh, I've got to go even deeper now. Then there's another layer. And I feel like, yeah, people are doing stuff to us, but really they're just hitting parts of us which are just unhealed and unsolved, That's how I see it.
Yeah.
And like you said, yeah, it doesn't justify what people do to you, but what we do afterwards and how we react to them is more important as well.
I feel like, actually holding a grudge is quite a toxic thing. Like, and it eats away. Like, I mean, I remember one day thinking, like, you know, I had a grudge. I've had a few grudges, but like, you know, but I had a grudge, an ongoing grudge for years and years with like a few people within my industry. And I would just think about them and I'd be angry. And I just thought to myself, I wonder if they think about me. Like,
Exactly.
Like, they're thinking about
It's
me
so
right
true.
now. Or they're just winning. Or they're just doing their...
And they're really winning.
Yeah,
like, that's what's
do they
just
really
jokes.
care how I feel right now? Like, why am I investing my energy in feeling like, you know, in feeding this negativity towards them when I could be investing in my craft or investing in the people that I love and so on and so forth.
So is it something you could just snap out of just like that, or do you reckon it's I think a process like you need to pray about it?
In that instance, that was a big ongoing thing. And also there's sometimes I find in my life, there are some areas that I don't pray about. Yeah. It's like, especially with work related stuff, it's almost like I pray for the bigger picture thing. So like I pray for the, like, you know, I hope I get finance for my next 10 films thing, but then I don't pray about, you know, the day-to-day, the mechanics of it, the interaction, the like actual, like, you know, I had an argument with that person yesterday. I don't pray about those things. I pray about more like, you know, grander strategic things rather than the minutiae. And I feel like actually as a Christian, that's what I've had to learn, is that, you know, actually you can talk to God about the dead arguments that you had with that person that you think, you know, there's no solution to. And so I just feel, you know, those are the gaps that I'm filling in. You've got the bird's eye view level, but then you've also got, like, you know, the steps that you need to consult with God on.
Does forgiveness have to stem beyond just individuals? So like beyond just forgiving a certain person? Like, I find it really easy not to hold a grudge against people that stare at me or that say something that's potentially offensive about my face. Like, that doesn't annoy me. What annoys me is the system or like the culture or like the prejudice or the inequality. So, like, as a Christian, do you have to then forgive the flaws in the system and the inequalities as well as the individuals? I'm not a Christian.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean to say that I'm not a forgiving person and I have a kind of strong sense of my own moral compass and feel that I try and be a good person irrespective of a religion. So I find it very easy to forgive people on an individual basis, and that's why I didn't want to like name and shame anybody earlier. But you know, by nature, my job as someone who campaigns for charities and I stand up to injustices and I stand up to prejudice, I find it really difficult to forgive the system and forgive the culture that is so ingrained and so wrong. How do I forgive that?
But don't you feel that you can't go and find the root to the issue?
I mean, ultimately, the root is that we're living in a flawed world, and like we are flawed people living in a flawed. But obviously, I'm coming at it maybe from a Christian perspective, and even like from if you take God out the equation, you've got people. All of us, we've inherently got a good side and bad side. Like, you know, even like with you know, I'll talk to like, you know, people that have never seen a church or Bible before in their life, and they recognize that, you know, we're all kind of flawed, and therefore it leads to us creating flawed systems and like, you know, and feeding these flawed systems. And so ultimately, when you're looking at government, the problem with government that we've got, or policy and so on and so forth, things that you might want to campaign against, right? The problem that you've got with those systems is that you've got these really flawed people like feeding this flawed system. And so therefore, and those systems are entrenched in such a way that it's almost like you can't knock them down. It's like, you know, it's like you're taking on so much. How do you find
the issue?
How do you find the source of this? And if you do find the source is so powerful and entrenched that you can't completely change it. But what you can, so you don't necessarily have to forgive those systems, but what you can do is that, you know, forgive people that contribute to those systems.
Or wouldn't you say a system started from one person who became two people, who became 3, 4, 5?
But how do you start? The thing is that you taking on that burden, and I think that's what I'm trying to say, is about you taking on that burden of trying to forgive and find out what's there? Like, who started this thing? How about instead of trying to, on the forgiveness side, what about you just try and just make, I always say this thing, make the change that you want to see, or be the change that you want to see. And just from there, from you, every single person you connect, you've connected that change and you're making change, and that's the only way. But if
and
you
that's
take
how
on
you
that
create
burden,
your own system,
do you
right?
get what
That's
I
how you
mean?
create. That's why you create a new system and a new way of doing stuff, right?
So when we expect the system to work, so government, for example, we forget that it is essentially run by a bunch of humans who are flawed and are able to make mistakes, but the media, or like the way that it's projected, like they can do no wrong. Like it makes it really difficult for people to just bow down and say, I've made a mistake. Like there's no room for that whatsoever, because we have such faith in the system to get it right first time.
I think it's quite a hard question, and first of all, I think it would depend on the circumstance. My standard would have to be it's kind of a simple thing, but what would Jesus do? If he was put in that situation, if he was, there were systems that he didn't agree with. He didn't agree with what the Pharisees were saying. He was the fulfillment of all their prophecies, and he came and they didn't even recognise him. They killed him. His own people killed him. They gave him over to the Romans to be killed. The Romans weren't even that bothered about killing him. And he said on the cross, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they're doing. So for me, that's my standard. So if that's not forgiving a system, then I don't know what is.
That's actually quite key, that for they don't know what they're doing, because genuinely these people that started the system don't have a clue what they're doing. And also because it's such a big thing, they don't know how it's impacting you, because the layer before it gets to you is so deep that they do not even understand the impact it has on us on a daily. And it's a shame, but I don't feel, for you personally, I don't think you should carry that heavy. It's heavy, because if she does something to me, it's just her. You're fighting a system. It's like a million people.
I mean, when you look at like the way government has to be done, because we live, there's millions and millions of people. It has to be done with numbers and statistics. And so that's why every so often you get like an instance where like a government minister has passed this rule. Like take the Windrush scandal, for instance. They've just passed this rule and probably not even thought about those people. And then it came to the fore and they're like, oh, actually, we didn't really mean to do that. We did, and it gets really, because they don't think about the real life impact it has on people. All they have is that they have a net migration target.
But is that forgivable?
No, but it has to be. It has to be if they rectify it. Do you get what I'm saying? Because
But there are a lot of things that people haven't rectified.
No, they are.
So in the States, the new law, the anti-abortion law, is it Alabama? Is that forgivable?
But can I ask a question? Who, and it's important for us to know, who is the person making these laws? Who is the person passing? Because it's not just Trump.
It's not one
No. That had nothing to do with
It's a
Trump.
whole-
That was local. That was a local state thing. That was a state thing.
But one of the things that when he first came into kind of power, that was one of the things that he did
He's
speak
pro-life.
about.
Yeah, Trump is pro-life.
I think to a degree, we're talking about people, but I think also we're talking about grace. We're talking about extending that grace. And so I like to throw this out. When I say grace, what comes to mind? What is grace? And how can we apply it, and should we apply it?
Grace is my mum's name.
Let's apply, Mama.
And so we'll apply my mum. And but I suppose ultimately for me, grace is like, unmerited blessing. And that's basically, in order to truly forgive, you have to be gracious. And so because of that, the way through forgiveness, you're practicing faith, like forgiving people that are doing the unforgivable. You're practicing that grace, and that's difficult for us as human beings, because it's like, what do you mean you get something that you don't deserve?
I think we all have an element of grace, but I don't think. It's a hard one. For me, I've been through situations where I may have done something wrong, or I may have not acted out of that usually, but I've been graced against it, if that makes sense. And I'm like, okay, that's cool, I get another chance. I get another chance.
And how does that feel?
It feels good. But then there's the other side of it where you're always going to get that potential other chance, you know, and whether you choose to do better or worse in that, it's obviously that person. But I think at the end, like you said, we're all flawed. We're all flawed and we're all going to make mistakes.
Can I ask
You
a
know?
question? And I feel like someone is asking this question through me, and I want to know as well. What's the difference between grace and forgiveness?
I think grace comes beside love. I think when I think of grace, I think of agape, or the Christian love, or unconditional love of each other. That, like for instance, when you're extending forgiveness to the people that you care about, like your family, or if people extend that towards you. If you've caused someone pain, and they choose to love you anyway. I think often forgiveness can be removed from a sense of relationship. You can forgive people who don't know you and haven't personally encountered you. But for instance, I guess we talked about forgiving a system, but I think grace comes with relationship.
So I'll post this. Is grace a gift or is grace offensive? Because to an unbeliever, it might be that. It might not be a gift. Do you know what I mean? It might not be this dispensation of love.
Yeah, I think starting off with a gift is, some of us don't know that it's a gift. Some of us just have grace for people, and for me as a Christian, I understand that grace has been given to me through God. How many times have I offended God? How many times have I turned my back on him, disobeyed him, but he's continuously forgiven me. And because of that, I can extend it to someone. So I could say it's a gift, but for someone that doesn't know it's a gift, it could still be a gift, I guess. But
is it offensive?
It's still something.
But can it be offensive though? Phyllida, to you, is it offensive?
I've got no clue, because grace to me means a completely different thing, and this is what I want to learn.
Yeah,
like,
so
what's the kind of grace to me would be kind of going through life with respect and understanding for each other. So, and also like grace to me is like, I don't know, ballet dancers or like, yeah.
This is what I was struggling with, because I was like, what is the difference? Because in my head, my mom would say, through the grace of God. And I was like, what does this mean? Like, that's, for me, I can't speak heavy on that word grace. I've experienced forgiveness more in my life, but I don't know if I connect with grace through my fellow human beings.
No, but you do, because
I don't know.
I think maybe you do, but ultimately for me, it's like I'm only able to do anything that I'm able to do by the grace of God, because I don't deserve. No, because I like I said, it's like my undeserved. I don't deserve to be a filmmaker.
Why don't you deserve it though?
Because ultimately, if you look at where I've come from, it just doesn't follow. I studied law, even on a real human basic level. I'm like an A student that went to uni, studied law. I did nothing to do with. I don't deserve to be but it was God's grace that placed me where I am in my life. That's what I feel as a Christian. Do you get what I'm saying? But as a second, for someone looking at it from an atheistic perspective, they might be like, "Oh, you're stupid. Like you just worked hard and then you got the opportunity." How does that even make sense? Do you know what I mean? But to me, I believe that, I am able to do everything that I'm able to do because of a higher power that is blessing me in a way that is unmerited, because actually my work, my conduct, my imperfections as a human being doesn't deserve that level of blessing. That's great.
And it's you realizing your imperfections, realizing that because I'm imperfect, and the fact that I'm still in my imperfection, I still get to do this, or I still get blessed with this, that is grace.
Okay, so for me, I used to go to church. I stopped when I was probably about 12 because I didn't feel that connection to a higher power. Now, since I've grown up, I believe in spirit, right? I'm not saying I believe in a God who is this figure who is shown as a white man. I don't necessarily believe in that. I believe there's a higher power working all through us and, for us. But But I didn't get when you said, I don't deserve that. But then I do get what you're saying, because there's been moments in my life where I've reached a certain level. I'm like, wow, like how did I do that? There's a higher power working for me. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's not just all of me. But then there was a bit of conflict when you said, I don't deserve it. But then I do kind of get what you're saying.
As though it's been predetermined what you should and shouldn't do. Like,
It is, but that's what I believe, right? Do you get what I'm saying? Like, you can't, it has been predetermined and predestined to achieve certain things. And in
But
order,
we also
like,
have free will.
I also have free will. But ultimately, like the Bible talks about predestination, the Bible talks about the fact that actually before we were born, God knew who we were. Like, do you get what I'm saying? And so really and truly, I as a Christian, like I said, it doesn't sit well with atheistic, it doesn't sit well with atheistic beliefs, but ultimately that's what I believe. Like, and I can sit here and say that, and people be like, oh, that doesn't even make sense, that's nonsense, but that's what I believe.
I feel bad that you feel like you don't deserve it, because you've worked hard and you've taken what life has thrown at you and you've run with it and you've made the most of it and you've gone where your talent lies.
Do you know what it is? Ultimately for me, it's like, it's not my might, it's not my human, I'm not so wise, I'm not so powerful to have been able to achieve all of these things, to have films released in the cinema, to have all my films that I've made go on Netflix, to do all of these things. It's not by my power. It's like, and because actually not everyone that does what I do has achieved the same level of success that I've achieved. Like, not everyone that works as hard as I do achieves the same level of success. Like, the thing is, the human condition is that if you work hard, you get whatever you want. That's not always true. And that's why people get depressed, and that's why people have mental health problems. Like, because they just feel like, but I've done everything. Do you get what I'm saying? But when you take a step back and you realize, actually, you know what? I've done my bit, but then like God is taking it further for me. That's what I believe. Like, do you get what I'm saying? But not everyone is kind of, it would make you not an atheist if you believe that. Like, believe the same thing that I do as a Christian. It wouldn't even make sense.
I'm not an atheist. Like, I do believe that there are kind of forces, and I'm kind of quite spiritual.
So would you say you're agnostic?
Yeah. So my mum is a Christian, but she has never kind of, and I quite enjoy going along to church with her, because it's a nice thing for us to do together, and there's elements of it that I do believe in and that I have some kind of affinity with, and it's the community aspect of it that I get, and particularly for my mum, it has been such an amazing thing for her to have in her life. But at the same time, she wouldn't ever come to me and say, you need grace in your life.
Yeah.
She would let me come to my own kind of, I'll be on my own journey.
Yeah.
I think for me, I have seen that, and a lot of times we've come across arrogant as Christians, where it's like, okay, yeah, you look like a happy person, but you're going to hell. And it's like, yo, how do we get from hello to you're going to hell? So I think we need, again, grace in our attitude and just how we speak to people in general, in our day-to-day life. In our workplaces, you know, I always say that, you know, yes, you're a Christian, but don't be a donut. You know what I'm saying?
But I think the truth, we have to be careful. I feel like there's the like human meaning of the word grace, which is just to be nice.
Yeah. For real.
Yeah.
No, but I'm
saying there's the Christian meaning, which is like, you know, God's blessing you in a way that you do not deserve. Yeah, that's when Christians talk about grace, that's what they mean.
I'm speaking on grace in regards to our attitude towards
conduct.
people.
Okay.
Grace. So
Be
I'm
nice.
giving someone grace. It's not just being nice to them, but giving some understanding that someone, okay, we come from different walks of life, we have different understandings. And for me, trying to, not coming down on your level, but trying to relate to someone is a form of grace.
It's just wisdom, more wisdom and being wise about how you communicate. Because my mom, she used to be the typical African minister that she would speak her mind. Oh my God, she would speak her mind, and I used to be like, don't say that. Like, but in her, the way she was brought up, it's like that for her. She learned if you don't do this.
I feel what we're talking about is nothing to do with grace. It's discernment. It's knowing when to to talk to being able to detect in conversation how to communicate to people, and that's nothing. That's actually not grace. That's discernment.
But one could argue, particularly as millennials, at the Roundtable particularly, sometimes the church or sometimes people of faith do not properly discern how to approach grace, how to discuss grace, and how to practice grace. And so I think that's also important.
Well, going up to someone and saying you need grace, I think the way of doing it is acting as Jesus did and showing people grace and showing people, I think, like what I was saying before about grace being found in relationship, I think inviting people to enter into personal relationship with God and then to experience that grace within that, because in all of our interpersonal relationships, we're continuously extending grace to each other and receiving it from each other. I think telling someone you need grace, the grace is already there. The grace is already provided.
So taking what Rachel said, if Asa was to show you grace, would that be offensive?
Obviously, it's all in how you say it.
And why wouldn't you be offended?
Because I want to grow as a person. Because my perspective is I want to grow. And I know that if I'm offended by something, or if someone hurts me in a certain way, then that's a certain unhealed part of myself. Okay. So it wouldn't offend me. Yeah, if you came to me in a certain type of way, then I'd be like, why are you saying it like that? Yeah. But that's different.
So that's as Rachel was saying, that it's in relationship. So I'd rather have a conversation with someone and for them to see, okay, there's a different conduct or there's something different about you. What is it? And then you're able to explain.
It's the grace of God in my life. My sister, let me tell you about the grace of God.
Instead of me just coming to you saying you need grace, let me show you grace, and let me allow you to see the grace that I'm extending. Let me show you, and then it will push you to ask me, and then we can have that conversation.
And that's dope. We have a relationship there. So this has been Grace and Forgiveness, and this right here is the Roundtable. I'm your girl T D Moyo. Stay locked.